And welcome back to another episode of the Gun Collective podcast. My name is Adam Kraut.
And my name is John Patton.
And today, this show is brought to you by Holosun and Frida Munitions. So we are pleased to be joined today by Hlebinsky, the curator of the Cody Firearms Museum, which is located at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. That museum's home to over 8,000 firearms, which date back to the 13th century. They're pretty old.
13th century. I didn't know guns were that old.
Yeah. So Ashley previously worked at the Smithsonian and is a model ambassador for the firearms community, if we do say so ourselves here. She's well-informed, passionate to the point of geekery, something that I know John and I can both relate to. She's blessed with a wicked sense of humor and apparently can swill whiskey and smoke cigars while holding forth on black powder muskets until your eyes glaze over. So had she been born a dude, she apparently would have killed it in the Civil War, in case anybody was wondering. She's also the president She's also the president of the Gun Code LLC, where she serves as a firearms consultant, both for museums and firearms manufacturers. So, Ashley, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to get you on here. And I didn't butcher your last name, correct?
I wasn't even paying attention. So yeah, it was great.
Awesome.
Totally good.
Well, listen
it's almost Christmas.
Yeah.
Even better. So I guess with that said, one of the things I omitted from your biography there that you did tell us, or at least told me about, was that you used to be a competitive ballroom dancer. And I've got to know, how did you get involved with that?
My mom's actually a professional figure skater, and I did figure skating when I was a kid, and I just realized I'm looking at myself talking to right now. But I did figure skating as a kid, and I wasn't great, but I sort of tried. And when I was in sixth grade, I started having surgeries, and I ended up in a wheelchair. And one of the surgeries that I had, they actually cut my leg in half, and they had to rotate it and like put pins in it to realign it. So I had to learn how to walk again. But what they did with that procedure, they didn't fix my entire leg, just my lower leg. So I had some issues when I got out of the wheelchair was walking when I was in a figure skate, because my hips kind of are still a little bit deformed. So I couldn't put my leg straight back. And so my mom thought it'd be good to build up muscle memory so that I could do everything on the ice again. So she put me in ballroom dance, because I did ice dancing, which is ballroom on the ice, and I never went back.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was probably way more deep than you intended.
Here's the thing. You've got that incredible backstory, but how the heck did you trip and fall backwards into being the curator of a firearms museum? I mean, you went from ballroom dancing and ice dancing and things of that nature, and now look at you. This is very interesting. I had no idea.
It's very different, yeah. And I wanted to be a doctor because I'd had so many surgeries when I was a kid. And so when I went into college, I was going to be a doctor. And, like when you have your like orientation and they tell you that like half of the students will change their major, I got like indignant that was never going to happen. And by second semester freshman year, I had changed my major to history. So it happened rapidly.
That's hysterical. So I had a roommate in college who we got to sophomore year where you had to declare a major, and we got to the point where he had enough credits to either do English or psychology, and he flipped a coin to choose what his major was. I kid you not.
Bold strategy.
See, I left psychology.
Lord.
Yeah, it was certainly an interesting topic. So I guess with that, one of the things at least that people are watching can see, and for those of you that listen to the podcast, you obviously won't be able to, but you're obviously a younger woman. How did you end up as the curator of a museum at such a young age? I mean, that's something usually, and I've been around museums a little bit. When I think of a curator, I think of somebody who's kind of on the edge of, the netherworld, if you will.
Wow. So, hey, if any museum curators out there, if you're listening, Adam thinks you're going to die soon.
Not all of you.
It's not like totally inaccurate. I'm actually a 50-year-old man. If I didn't think you could tell, but
is that just
I sound like what?
Identify as, or?
But I actually got interested in firearms through the medical aspect of it. I said I wanted to be a doctor, and I was interested in how battlefield medicine changed, specifically from the American Revolution to the Civil War. And so I changed my major to history because I had some stupid aha moment when I was in college that like people work at historic sites. They don't just magically get run by like fairies and happen. And so I decided I wanted to work in that field, and I started studying guns. So from the other end of it, with wounds in the Civil War, and then I got an internship at a military museum, which if you saw the recoil thing today, I was at that military museum earlier today. And I got about 200 guns put in front of me, and I had to identify what they were, what had been modified, all that basic catalog information. And I had never held a gun before. I was 18.
Wait.
And
now the question there is, what year was that? How long ago was that?
What year is that? I don't know, I was 18, so it's 10 years ago. Math.
Okay.
Mathematician, I am
never
not.
touched a gun.
Yeah, I never touched a gun before.
Either.
I don't math so good.
I no.
All right.
No.
So 10 years ago, never touched a firearm. Keep going. This is a great story.
Okay, so they basically put 200 different guns in front of me, and it started in the Civil War, and the collection goes up through modern conflicts. And so I had to start doing like a lot of research to kind of figure out what everything was. And I just got hooked. I thought it was really fascinating. There was a gun in the museum. It was a Civil War Enfield that the soldier had carved every battle that he fought in into the stock. So he hand carved it. And that was kind of a moment for me where I realized that this wasn't just about technology, that this was about people. And so I did everything I could to learn about guns. I took an NRA, basics class. I started studying guns, reading about them, doing internships wherever I could. And the one thing that I felt was really important was, because firearms are so technical, if I was going to research them as an academic, I wanted to know how to shoot them, how to handle them, how they operated, because it's such a technical kind of field. And so I just started doing whatever I could. And I don't think it was the following summer. It was a couple summers later. I ended up as an intern in the botany department of the Smithsonian, researching U.S. expeditions. And when you're an intern at the Smithsonian, they give you a Smithsonian email. So you feel like you can, email anybody. And I did. I emailed the firearms curator at the Smithsonian, and I met with him. And he's really one of the people that's responsible for helping me learn as much as I have about guns. And I worked with him for about 3 years there. And I, through that email thing that I had, I actually contacted Cody. People respond really quickly to a Smithsonian email account. And so I came out to Cody the following year, and I started doing fellowships there when I wasn't in school. And then when I was in school, I was working at the Smithsonian on days I didn't have classes.
I don't know that there's not really a good way to do that. Is an abnormal story, and I love it. So you basically said, you know what, I'm working for the Smithsonian, but I'm going to use that to my advantage.
I'm interning for the Smithsonian, and hey, look, I've got a Smithsonian, what is it, .org,
.edu, I think. I think it's edu. I can't remember. Actually, I actually can't even remember. It's been so long. si.edu. Yeah.
Smithsonian.reply to this email, damn it.
Yeah. Well, and the Cody Museum is an affiliate of the Smithsonian. And so I had heard about it. And so I figured I'll just email the curator. And he was like, well, we'll bring you out. And so at the end of that first internship summer, I ended up going out to Cody. And he's like, so you're going to come out next summer? And I laughed. And he told me to apply for a research fellowship. I studied the glamorization and demonization of firearms in the arts, looking specifically at Westerns and dramatic theater. It's a long story. And so I just kind of kept coming back. I kept coming back like a bad penny. And when I got my master's degree in 2013, they hired me full time. And I went from assistant. So I guess in 7 years, I went from intern to curator. The curator there was older, and they didn't have a replacement for him. So I went specifically to study under him, to study with other people, to take over as curator when he retired, which he did almost 3 years ago.
And you told me at the beginning of this podcast, John, that I was wrong for saying curators are old.
Well, I mean, she's a curator. She's not that old, so there goes your theory.
Anyway, well, I mean, that's a really fascinating way. So, Cody, Wyoming. Interesting place. I looked it up on a map because I wasn't quite sure where it was. I've been to Wyoming once. I was actually out in Grand Teton last year, a beautiful area, and I was just like, if I ever make it back to Jackson Hole, which I will do, how far is Cody? So I can maybe take a peek at this museum. And then I found out it was a 4-hour drive, like 4.5 hours with a loop there. So
that's not that bad. That's like close.
I guess
well, when the speed limit's 100 something.
Yeah, I was going to say,
an hour,
is that flat out?
Well, no, part of that's through Yellowstone, so no, it's not. It's like 45.
Yeah, no, if part of that's through Yellowstone, then no. That's like...
I have actually gone to Jackson for a day trip before, so it's possible. Okay. It's not that far.
So
it's 3 hours, 4 hours, but 4 hours.
I am very, very curious here. So you've become a curator, and you find this passion with like not just like guns in general, but really, really interesting old guns. Have you ever met somebody that has a similar passion? If you did, who was it?
Oh, I know lots of people. They're all firearms curators. But I do want to say something, because it is a misconception that I'm only interested in old guns. I study the perception of guns and culture. So I study, from early firearms, hand cannons, and I study all the way up through modern day. And so some of the time periods, I look a lot at the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I looked at that when I was in graduate school with firearms counterculture. And so I actually like the macro history of firearms. I mean, I've got areas and expertise in several different time periods, but I really like looking at everything. But last summer, we hosted the first ever symposium for firearms historians and museum professionals. And we had people from, arms and armor curators from the Met to the Smithsonian to the Royal Armories in England. And we learned that there is a type for firearms curator, and I actually do fit it, except the female part that's not. But weird and nerdy and a little bit inappropriate is the gun curator type. So all of those people, they all have their passions in different time periods, and we all really learn a lot from each other. And it was a good group. They're all coming back out in May this year, and we're forming the only and first ever academic association of firearms historians and museum professionals. One thing that we learned from the symposium was that from art museums to history museums, the firearms collections have been proven to be the most popular publicly, and even some of the art museums have have counters of people that come into their galleries, so they can prove that more people go into those galleries, but that they are the least respected academically and within our own institutions. So we are not being invited to the academic party right now, so we're making our own party and just kind of barreling our way in.
That's really fascinating. So I know you're from Pennsylvania, except from the wrong side of the state, but we'll get into that.
I would say that I'm from the right side. Oh man,
it's actually
I did mute my phone, but it's my phone. I did mute it, but my iPad I didn't mute. My bad.
That's okay.
I don't even know how to mute my iPad.
It's that.
I'm just so popular. I'm sorry.
It's that time of the year when
it's actually my doctor. So I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow.
You were talking about different art galleries and stuff in the Philadelphia Art Museum, and I know we talked about this previously through email and stuff, but the Philadelphia Art Museum, for those that don't know, has actually a firearms collection in the armor exhibit, which is the armor is just cool anyway, if you like that kind of stuff. I think it's, I'm nerdy like that, but the firearms, if you look at some of the engravings and the work that went into these, and these are, 14th, 15th century firearms, the engraving's immaculate. You know what it's almost like? It reminds me of, it's like the Fudd gun of days gone by, that's intricately engraved and only used for their hunting trips.
I love that.
I thought it was a good observation, but apparently, I was alone in that. So,
so we've had a bunch of people. We put out that we were going to have you on the show, and we reached out to our audience and said, what do we want to talk about? What do you guys want to know from Ashley? What can we convey here? And it looks, we did some digging, and apparently, you went to University of Delaware. Is that correct?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. So people are actually wondering if you're going to go back to Delaware. I don't know a single person that has moved out of Delaware and gone back. Are you that brave person?
Oh, I love Delaware. I love Delaware. Actually, Delaware is one of my favorite states. That's terrible. I didn't realize it was so despised. Would I go back to Delaware? It was and it's small wonder.
Yeah.
And Wayne's World. No, I actually really like Delaware. University of Delaware, I've tried to go back to speak a bunch of times, but it's never worked out. But I would love to go back. When I was at Delaware, I helped out with Fort Delaware, the Civil War fort, and I worked during their paranormal investigations. So like I was that person that took you into like the barracks and would be like, and this is where soldiers would sleep. And then the ghost hunters would come in and be like, is there anybody here? Is there anybody here? Please cross the rods. And so I did that for like 3 years, and I thought it was the coolest thing on the planet. It was freezing. But when else are you able to go to an island with a Civil War prison on it? And it was repurposed during World War I, and they turn all the power off in the entire fort so that you can use these, paranormal meters, whatever, and run around a fort in the dark at night around Halloween. I mean, it was awesome. So I really liked it from the historical perspective. I also gave ghost tours in historic Newcastle, and I did an internship at the Reed House and Gardens in Newcastle, and also the Dutch House. And I'm blanking on the other one. Sorry, Mike. But yeah, so I thought the history behind Delaware was great. And the other thing I liked about Delaware was when I was in graduate school, the days I didn't take the MARC train into DC, if I wanted to go down to the beach, I could go down to the beach and do my work, air quotes on that one, and sit on the beach and do my reading for graduate school and then drive back up. And so my roommate and I would do that a bunch of times. And so I really actually think it's a very underrated state, but it's a pretty neat place. Would I move back there? I don't think career-wise. I could get my fiance, who's from Arizona, to move to Delaware, but I totally have a house there. If I could afford a house in historic Newcastle, I'd totally do it.
Oh, Newcastle, that's tough. That's tough. It's beautiful there. I mean, a good friend.
Well, part of Newcastle
is originally from that area. He's one of the guys that helped me get into shotgun shooting, Adam Peeney, and he's a Delaware guy.
I've been going to the Delaware shore since I was a little kid, so.
Yeah. I poke fun at Delaware just like I poke fun at everything. For those of you that are just tuning in live, we're here with Ashley Hlebinsky from the Cody Firearms Museum. She's a curator and one of the more interesting people that I've met this year. You've got stories for days, and it's so just like, really? I find myself just questioning, wow, that's so neat.
Well, that's what happens when you talk to interesting people.
Yeah, it's cool. It's awesome, man.
So, going back to, not to harp on your career as the museum curator, but to harp on your career, we all have this, I guess, image to some degree of what a curator is, and then on top of that, what that curator actually does. But I don't think anybody really knows what the job, other than those that work, I guess, if in the industry, if you will.
Yeah, I certainly don't understand what exactly, what's kind of encompassed in being a curator.
You almost think it's almost sounds like a caretaker to some degree, but can you give us a little bit of an idea as to
it's like the Undertaker?
Yeah, well, not quite, but yeah, sort of. I'm here to bury these guns. So, what your jobs are as a museum curator, like what is it that you do on a day-to-day basis, or even long-term, if it's planning out for the future, things like that. Can you give us a little bit of a insight into that window there?
Yeah, curator can mean a different thing in a lot of different museums. For example, I was going to do a meeting at a big museum, and I was looking at meeting with a bunch of the staff members, and someone made a comment of like, well, you don't want to meet with them. They're just the curators. And I was like, that I'm a curator, right? And they were like, well, it's different. And the reason they, yeah, right. I was like, what? But no, the reason they said that is because the Cody Firearms Museum is a part of the Buffalo Bills Center of the West, which you mentioned at the beginning of this, which is really a complex of 5 museums on under one 7-acre roof. So a curator of each of those museums functions as a director as well. So we run the museum. So a lot of times you'll have multiple curators with different areas of expertise in their collections. So like with mine, you could have, a military curator and a sporting arms curator and an embellishment curator kind of thing. But it's just me in the Cody Firearms Museum. So from the bureaucratic side, I write grants, I budget, I write proposals. I do all the day-to-day management of the museum. But then from the curatorial side, I do care and maintenance of collections. We check things to see if there's any damage. We can do minimal work on the guns. We do have a full-scale conservation lab, though, so if there's like active rust or something going on, we can take it down there. I plan exhibitions, so I design exhibitions. I write scholarly articles. I give lectures. I do a lot of media. So like that gun code that I mentioned, that you mentioned that I have a consulting business with, it all kind of ties into my job at the Cody, because it's about taking care of the collections, making sure that there's money in the museum, and then educating the public. And so I do that as well as acquisitions. I go out and if you want to give me a gun, I may not take it, but I might. So I have to evaluate what should come into the collection. And we are also fully renovating our museum. It's about 40,000 square feet, and we're gutting it completely. And we're putting about 6,000 firearms on display in the new museum. We only have about a little under 4,000 right now. And we're adding 3 firearm simulators in, and it's going to be extraordinary. But I'm also in charge of that project in addition to running the day-to-day of the museum.
That sounds like a massive, massive amount of stuff going on all at once, kind of all over the place. I think that's incredible.
It's a lot to be responsible for.
Yeah. So the thing that kind of comes to mind there, you talked about preserving the firearms. You've got a lab kind of on site to help maintain everything. Was there ever a time when you guys looked at a collection and went, oh man, we would love to have this, or even a particular firearm, but it's so beat up? What's the process for kind of deciding if you can take something in and if it's usable for the museum? Like what goes through your mind when you're trying to decide if this fits into what you guys are trying to educate people on?
So we have an encyclopedic collection. So we kind of want a little bit of everything. And I also say that a lot of times we end up turning more people away than we do accepting, because when you have over 8,000 firearms, you've got a lot already. So we're looking for guns that have history, stories, provenance to a particular person, or a model that we don't already have, or, a better version of something that we already have. You mentioned about a gun being beat up. That wouldn't deter us if it had a really interesting story. I don't know if you remember, but I think it was in 2015, Great Basin National Park found a Winchester leaning up against a tree.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I remember that story. It was awesome.
Yeah, so we actually did the conservation work on it. Great Basin National Park contacted us, drove it up to the museum. We had it x-rayed across the street. We walked it across the street and had it x-rayed, and we found a cartridge in the stock, and where you normally put your cleaning rods. And we did minimal conservation work. One thing that we believe in our museum is conservation, not restoration. Now, we've got some really cool restored guns, and that's a part of its history. But with a lot of the stuff that we have, we just want to prevent active corrosion and further decay. We don't want to make it look like new. I'm sure like art museums would have a different kind of opinion on that. And so with the Great Basin gun, we just stabilized it so that it wouldn't decay any further, but we wouldn't want it to look new because that's a part of its allure, that's a part of its story. And so we displayed that for a while. So really anything, it's just, I'm kind of picky right now. If we have it already, it doesn't make sense to give it to us because I can't promise it'll be displayed if I already have 20, And so what I tend to do when I've got time is if someone, has a gun and I can't seat it in our collection, I ask where they're from and see if there's a local museum that maybe would need an artifact like that and not have as extensive a collection.
Yeah, wow. That's so neat.
Stuff, yeah.
Again, just wow, that's cool.
The nerddom over here is just freaking out to some degree.
Very cool. I love that you guys don't restore everything. Obviously some things you might, some things you might not, but the general idea of preservation, not restoration. I don't remember the exact words you used, but that's awesome. I think keeping that story and keeping it and stabilizing it is what you said, and I love that. I think that's incredible because so often people, and I saw this when I worked in different gun stores and stuff, people would bring in old guns and they would be just in this incredible patina and just be so cool, and they would be like, can you clean this up? I want to shoot it. Like, I don't want to screw it up. It's just so cool like it is. Let that kind of...
Let it ride.
Yeah. Shoot it like it is. Clean it, clean the bore so it's shootable. But...
So
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't if it's not shootable, don't shoot it like it is.
Yeah. I've seen some guns that aren't shootable. You would be shocked what comes out of an Amish barn.
no, I wouldn't.
I
don't
have
know if
never
I would
seen
be.
so much rust.
So here's another question that came from the comments, and I was actually, this is a really good question, and I want to tie it into what you said earlier because I don't recall the figures. So currently in the exhibits, how many firearms are on display?
A little less than 4,000, I think.
So about half the collection?
A little bit more than, well, if you could, so the 8,000 guns, we distribute them all. So yeah, about half the collection. It's
So
more than
ish.
50% if you just count ours. Yeah.
Okay.
We've
So
got guns in every museum.
all right.
to
Well,
specify.
we're talking years, so we'll call it 50% of the collections on display currently. And,
Okay.
and the new space you're moving into is going to be, you said 6,000 guns on display, correct?
We the news, it's the same space. It's just we're reconfiguring it within the footprint. But yeah, it'll be at least 6,000 firearms. We've got about 1,000 already spread out through the other museums. So it'll be at least 6,000 firearms, and that's because we have an upper floor and a lower floor, and the upper floor will be really interpretive. I think we'll have about 3,000 or 4,000 guns up there with the firearm simulators, really hands-on. You'll be able to work a bolt action, work a lever action, really interpretive and something that contextualizes guns for people because we're the only gun museum in the United States that gets a very large percentage of non-gun people. We're a destination for gun enthusiasts, but because there's 4 other museums on our site, we get a lot of people from all over the world that have never really encountered a gun before, and we get a lot of coastal people that, have differing opinions on firearms. And our current museum is set up very much like an art museum, which is kind of like a gun collector display. So like if you know what you're looking at, then you know all the connections. But if you don't know anything about guns, then you're kind of like, wow, you got a lot of guns here. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when educating people that don't know about guns, because this might be their only opportunity to learn about how many ways guns were used throughout history and how they were integral to our history. And they're not this separatist thing that you almost could perceive today if you watch, the news and everything. And so we are trying to make it a lot more interactive, a lot more interpretive. We will have a modern shooting sports gallery because I think that the modern shooting sports are one of the most underrepresented sports in our country, and they thrive, and people don't even know. I work with the media all the time, and I'll mention, oh, my fiance is a professional shooter, and they'll be like, I don't know what that means. So Julie Gollub's actually, we're working with her. I think she's going to do a video for us, and we're asking modern athletes to kind of loan some of their guns for a display so that people can see, guns today, and then kind of go back into the history. But down in the basement, or lower level, sorry, they don't want me to call it the basement because it sounds like spiderwebby. Down our lower level is the collector space, the deep research space. And we'll have a gun library where you can see the pull-out racks, where you can see the guns really up close on both sides, which you don't often get to see in a museum display. We can get about 2,000 guns in that. We're also going to do an extensive ammunition display down there. We're going to do a patent room of all the prototypes that we couldn't fit in the main story upstairs. And there'll be 2 research rooms so that if you schedule with us ahead of time and you want to look at a gun or read some of our, archival material, you can schedule with us and go and sit in the reading room. And when we don't have scholars, we can bring guns in there and work on them there so visitors can watch us working on the guns.
That is absolutely astonishing. Adam and I are sitting here off camera.
We're just looking at each other like,
yeah, we need to go.
Well,
this sounds amazing.
I guess for those that can't see the expression on my face, how would you describe that?
Shock and awe.
Shock and awe would probably be a pretty
Shock
good
and awe.
description of that. So I have in that same vein, kind of. So essentially, most of the firearms roundabout will be on display at some point. But currently, how do you go through a collection that's that vast and narrow down the ones that are going to be on display? Is it simply that you have enough duplicates that it's just, okay, we're taking the nicest sample of this particular one and putting it out? Or is it... is there some kind of there's got to be a method to the madness, I imagine.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's cool.
Kind of. Is the answer. Yeah, a lot of people always want to see the vaults because they think that's where all the hidden gems are. And we really don't try to do that at the Cody Firearms Museum. But there is a large collection that is awesome that is not on display, because when they built the Cody Firearms Museum in 1991, it was originally the Winchester Museum in the 70s and 80s. And so they were still very much trying to interpret this Western story because it's the Buffalo Bill center of the West. But so they tried to do military and they tried to do these things, but they didn't really bring it up to the present. And so we've got our SOT vault, and we've got it's Vault I. It's a vault within a vault. And so we've got these amazing prototype Liberator shotguns. Those are the short barrel, 4-barrel shotguns that were cheap and awesome, but they didn't use them. And then we've got like the Winchester M1 Garand Select fire guns. Those are the ones that were competing for the M14, and they're like almost urban legend. People know about them, but they've been in our vaults for like 25 years, but they didn't fit the original story for the museum. And the way the museum was originally set up, it was really difficult to kind of find a place for them because every square footage was occupied. So now when we go through them, we are picking out things that are unique, that are different, and kind of relegating, because we'll be able to get most of our guns on display. We're going to relegate the ones that aren't on display to more of our like a reference collection. So if you want to see a 1873, we don't have to get it off display every time. And then the other part of that, which is always good museum practice, which is to rotate things. So if we've got, you know, some surplus 73s or 94s or whatever, we can bring them out and get the other ones out of the light for a while and put them in dark storage so that they can rest and then put them back on display.
I am so jazzed that you have so many, like, you're just rattling them off like it's nothing, and that's stuff you see once in a lifetime. You know, I had the
unless you work at
opportunity-
the Cody Firearms Museum, in which case it's a daily occurrence.
Right. I had the opportunity to visit the NRA Museum a few years ago down in Fairfax, and that's a really interesting experience. Got a lot of really cool stuff, and it sounds like you guys kind of trump that. Which is awesome. I have a question, though. I just
you said that, not me.
I want to know: have you ever had your hands on? I believe the model code is 7188, a Remington 7188. Supposedly, this was a full auto Remington 1100 12 gauge. Have you ever seen this? Heard of this?
Not heard of it, not seen it. But
maybe the internet is lying
collection.
to me, but I've
no, I mean, there are so many guns. Don't be shocked if I don't know of a particular model. I'm amazed by how much I don't know every day. But no, I mean, the Remington has a really great collection already, and we have a couple hundred guns from Remington. The NRA Museum, I think, has a couple hundred guns from Remington, and then they've got thousands of guns in their factory kind of collection. So it's something worth looking into.
So, besides my ridiculous gun that you've never heard of and I could be full of crap on, do you have a favorite, maybe one or two in the collection currently? I know that you know, people like us, we're nerds and that rotates all the time. What are you really appreciating right now?
Oh, it really does change a lot, but I have a fondness for the David Marshall Williams M1 carbine prototype, and just because that story is wonky, because a lot of people, you know, say that David Marshall Williams invented the M1 carbine, which isn't accurate. I mean, he definitely was instrumental in it, and there were a lot of kind of components that they incorporated, but he was originally hired by I think it was Evan Pugsley. But by Winchester to work on Jonathan E. Browning, who was John Browning's half-brother, his semi-automatic prototype. He passed away, so they hired him, and he worked on that, and it was the G30 that he was working on. But he wasn't involved in the original test guns. So we have a case at the Cody Firearms Museum that is the M1 Carbine Test Gun 1, Test Gun 2, the first production M1 carbine, and then the Carbine Williams, or the David Marshall Williams prototype. And that's because David Marshall Williams didn't initially work on the project, although they did incorporate some of his inventions into that. Then the second round, Test Gun 2, they did put him in charge of it. And we've got the letter like chronicling from Edwin Pugsley, who was the vice president of Winchester for a long time, you know, basically saying how difficult he was. And so they like basically fired him off the Test Gun 2 project. And they were like, why don't you go work on your own gun for like a while, like over here by yourself? And so he started working on this prototype on his own. But when it was ready to go to testing, his wasn't going to be ready. So they brought him back on the Test Gun 2 project to finish it out, to put that to testing, to become the M1 carbine. But I love it because it's like, it to me, David Marshall Williams' specific carbine prototype was kind of like the, like, you're in trouble, go sit in the corner and draw kind of thing. So I think that I think that's great. So that one I'm a big fan of. Another one, if I'm going to go backwards in history that we've got that's pretty cool, is a wheelock, really old gun from the 1600s. And it's a signed English wheelock. And English wheelocks were not rare, but the ones that have survived that are signed, that have the actual gunsmith's name on it, those are incredibly rare. And not only do we have one that's signed, it was a Roland, I believe was the designer's name, but 40 years after the gun was made, we pretty much know who bought it, when they bought it, what they did with it, then who they sold it to and where it went. There was like a period in the 19th century where it got lost when it came over to the United States. But we know that it was bought by a court painter and it was in his collection. And then it went to some other really rich dude's collection. And he put it on display in a museum. It came over to the United States and it went from famous collector to the Winchester Arms collection, which came to our museum in 1975. And so to get a gun that dates back to the 1600s and be able to trace the ownership like that, that's like unheard of.
I wonder if it has an ATF 4473 somewhere, going back years, way before ATF. I don't know.
I know.
So Ashley, where can people find out more about you and the Cody Firearms Museum?
You can check the Cody Firearms Museum out on our website. We're centerofthewest.org. We also have Cody Firearms Museum on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we do troll Reddit from time to time. And then I have a personal page, which is Ashley. It's just my name, Ashley Hlebinsky, at the Gun Code on Facebook and Instagram. So you usually get some crossover and information and more of my face in my personal life.
Wow. The H is silent, huh? All right.
The H is silent. Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to join us. We really enjoyed having you as a guest here. And folks, if you guys are passing on through Wyoming, make sure you stop and check out the Cody Firearms Museum. It sounds like an awesome place to check out. Certainly when I get back out west that way, it's going to be on my list of places to go.
Listen, I'm making a trip to Cody, Wyoming just to go to this place. This sounds incredible.
Yeah, field trip?
It's
definitely do it. Yeah, they've told us that before. Make sure that if you want to come soon, because we will be, in construction next fall. We'll always have a lot of guns on display. We're doing a temporary exhibition, and we're just going to inundate all the other museums with guns. And I can do some private tours if people schedule in advance while we're doing construction. And then the opening of the new museum will be June 2019.
Awesome. Well, Ashley, again, thank you so much.
Thank you. This is fun.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. I'm going to go make cookies.
Bye,
Ashley.
Bye.
All
right, Adam. That was incredible. Can you believe the amount? Can you just believe the amount of cool stuff that they have in that museum?
I'm still in shock. I 8,000 firearms. I can't even fathom how big of a collection that is. Not to mention you have the historical value, both from just a monetary, I imagine there's some, but just a historical value in those firearms, where they've been, what they've been through, who's owned them. I mean, that's cool.
I mean, there's some key guns in there that have shaped American history. Just on the small bits that she gave us, there's some incredible prototypes, actual guns, the guns with incredible provenance. I mean, unfathomable. And speaking of monetary value,
it's that time.
It is that time to pay the bills. Guys, we got sponsors for the show. Our first sponsor this week is going to be HoloSun. We talked about them a little bit last week. We're going to talk about them again. They are absolutely crushing it in the affordable optic game. I've got a whole box of them upstairs. They sent me a whole bunch because we're going to be doing some work together, and I want to tell you guys about what they do. I've got the 515 CU and the 503 CU, both of which have like a solar panel on top, which I love. I think it's a great idea because it extends the battery life, and I think all around for the value that they have, I think they're like
they're a good deal.
I want to say they're about a $200 optic-ish, depending on the model, of course. And on top of that, you can throw that on like a Aimpoint Micro T1 mount. Yep. And have a good quality optic that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, because most guys don't need something incredibly durable that you can, shoot out of a cannon. I'm not saying it can't do that. I'm just saying you may not need to go and buy something meant to do that. So you can check out holosun.com. and check out all their optics, and be sure to tell them that the Gun Collective sent you, because we really like them. We're pumped on what they're doing, and we think you should check them out.
And our second sponsor this evening is Frida Munitions. You may be familiar with them from our Freedom Fridays here at the Gun Collective, where we showcase a bunch of their ammunition, running through some different guns. I mean, I got to say, for the cost perspective to what you're getting, especially in their subsonic hush line and their bore buster, if you're one of those guys out there slaying pigs, which I encourage everybody in the states that can do it to do, that's it's good bang for your buck, literally. So Frida Munitions, make sure you go check them out. They got a whole bunch of different lines of ammunition. They also sell reloading components, so if you're one of those guys that likes to make your own, they've got you covered in that regard too. I believe their Extreme Bullet line is good stuff. I've been using their 55 grain 223 projectiles, and I'm happy
and
with
it's
that.
affordable.
Yes. Well, that's the big part. It is affordable. So make sure you head on over to freedommunitions.com and be sure to use the coupon code TGC5 for 5% off the entire website.
Ooh, that's cool, man. I think I like the Freedom stuff. We've got a few boxes of it here in the studio, and we got some of the tagged outline that we're going to try, and 300 Win Mag. We've got, I think, some 308 in the bore buster, and we're going to try them both. It's going to be awesome. I'm pumped.
Yeah.
So cool. Check out Freedom Munitions, guys. Thank you. What's next? What are we talking about this week, Adam? I have been running around like a chicken with his head cut off today.
Me too.
Yeah,
me too.
So Adam's been prepping for the show. I've been handling some family stuff. We've got some unfortunate stuff coming up this weekend, but the wheels keep turning. And
they do.
Adam, what are we looking at, man? Tell me about it.
So today, our first article/video for you folks is going to be the Maxim 9 from Silencer.
And we'll be sure to put the links in the description so that you guys can see this. We're working on getting screen sharing, so those of you watching the video can see this. But right now, we're still trying to work the kinks out of that. So tell me about this. What is this? It says Maxim 9 full auto machine pistol. What happened?
So it's exactly what you think happened. Some dude made the Maxim 9 a machine gun. And I got to admit, it's pretty freaking sweet.
Do we know if he did this legally or if this is just
I believe he's definitely an SOT.
Okay.
But I mean, this thing is just it just spews ammo. If you've ever shot a full auto Glock, the Glock 18, Glock 18C, or even the guys that are out there with SOTs that are converting them, those things just run through ammunition like nobody's business.
All right, I gotta watch it.
So he's out there, and
I'm going to hold that up to the microphone. I'm going to play that one more time.
It's incredible how fast this thing goes through the magazine.
No, that's not it. Cancel. It's trying to play the next video.
We don't want that. We don't know what that is.
Here we go. Oh, that's fast. What do you think the cyclic rate on that is? It sounds about as quick as a Glock.
I don't know. It's fast. It's faster than anybody could ever need it to be. I mean, that was what, 1-2 seconds before that magazine was emptied?
Well, I think most, even a 30-round machine gun will dump it in 1.5 seconds or something.
Yeah.
It's awesome. That's so cool.
I found that, and I thought that was neat and worthy of discussion.
We'll definitely put a link to that because that's really neat.
Mm-hmm. So that was our first kind of article for today. The second one's actually based on a blog I wrote earlier, so we don't really need to pull up the link on that. But for those of you that follow regulatory rulemaking, things like that, ATF, I recently published an article in Recoil that ATF and DOJ were working to publish an advance notice of proposed rulemaking in relation to applying the definition of a machine gun to bump fire stocks. And
wait. So hold on. You just lawyered up, and not everybody understands what that all means. So basically,
we're gonna break it down.
Hold on. So what you're telling me, and what I just sucked out of what you just said, was that ATF is considering making a bump fire stock a machine gun or a machine gun part.
That's a pretty, that's a decent description of it. So what happened here, and also it includes other similar devices. So for those of you that saw this article previously or knew that ATF was considering this, you may have thought, well, what about my binary trigger? And that certainly would possibly come into play here as well. So what this is when you have the regulatory process for a new regulation like we saw with ATF 41F, or even what the Social Security Administration did when we're talking about finding somebody, adjudicating somebody mentally defective for the purposes of reporting them to NICS. Essentially, there's a couple ways that you can get into rulemaking to create a new regulation. What this is an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. So at this point, they don't have language that they're introducing. They're seeking feedback to help possibly shape that if they decide to move forward with it. So it's important that people take a look at this stuff and become involved in the process to try and stave ATF from even bothering going forward with proposing a rule for it. This is the pre...
Yeah, this is the meme where they're looking over the fence.
Yes, pretty much. And they're saying, well, what can we do about it? And this is the part where you get to come in and say, well, you can't do anything about it because here's the definition of a machine gun, and this is what this is, and it's not a machine gun.
It's absolutely not a machine gun.
Right. So that's something you guys are going to want to go take a look at. You can find that on blog.princelaw.com. Also head on over to Google, look at different ways to write a comment for that. But, we always tell people that you should be involved in the political process, and this is just another aspect of that. So I think it's important to mention.
So I think there's something that you and I need to discuss here for the people at home. The ATF is taking it upon themselves to go, listen, we're looking at this, which is great. I don't know if they're required to tell people they're doing this, are they?
If they're going to do a new regulation, it has to be announced. So that for a new regulation to go into effect,
they're not quite there yet, though. So
the advance notice isn't something that's required by the Administrative Procedures Act.
Somebody in the ATF is smart enough to let us know that they are potentially going to look at changing the regulations on machine guns to include bump fire stocks, binary, and the like, binary triggers, and... Dear God. I mean, what do you said get involved? I mean, is this the point where everybody needs to make comments? How do we tell the ATF, no, you're not allowed to do this?
That's a very good question, and we didn't talk about that. So there was a notice published earlier today that there will be a notice published in the Federal Register. So if you go to federalregister.gov, tomorrow you will see it published there, and that notice will have instructions as to how to submit a comment. It also listed the notice that they've published today, which shows the notice that they'll publish tomorrow.
So they put a notice for the notice, so they can notice while you notice?
Essentially, it was an advance notice for the advance notice of proposed rulemaking.
This is stupid.
Yeah. So the notice that was published today had text of what's going to be there tomorrow, and they want to know specifically from consumers only about three things. They're more interested in what the manufacturers and dealers are looking at in this aspect, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't participate in it. So
you absolutely should participate. The ATF works for you, after all.
Yeah,
they're a government agency.
Theoretically, the one
Sorry,
thing
I like you, ATF. Don't shut me down.
The one thing you do need to know is that the comments are due 30 days from the date of publication. So I calculated that. That's January 22nd. It's a Sunday. They're due by 11.
During SHOT Show.
Yeah. But they're due. So if you write, what's the work early, and then you don't have to worry about it. Don't do what I do. Don't procrastinate.
What we need to do then, I think, is come up with a legal brief where we're instructing people on, giving some guidance.
It's already in the works.
Perfect.
Got you covered. So by 11:59, for those of you that aren't watching the legal brief, 11:59 p.m., January the 22nd, your comment is due. Because it's electronic, you get till 11:59. Once that clock strokes midnight, poof, pumpkin carriage.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that sucks. The ATF may be just completely...
We'll see. This isn't going to be an overnight process, but
it never is. But ATF 41F wasn't an overnight process, and it still went through.
It did.
Even though, guys like you made comments that made sense, but the ATF was like, I don't think so. We're in charge here.
Well, we'll see what we're left with.
Yeah. Okay. So what's next? What do we got?
Well, I believe you had mentioned the Heiser Defense.
Oh, yeah. No. It wasn't Heiser Defense. It was Honor Guard.
Honor Guard. Sorry. I'm not aware of this.
No, sorry. Please. Was it Honor Defense? I'm sorry. Let me just confirm.
He mentioned this to me at the beginning of the podcast, and this is not an article I had pulled, so I honestly don't know what he is talking about. But John seemed very excited to talk about this.
There was a firearm that was found to be no longer drop safe.
Oh, I did see that.
And the guy who found this out, his name's Patrick.
There was a video on that.
He used to work for the firearm blog. I'm scrolling through my phone.
It's the Honor Guard pistol. And
is it Honor Guard?
Yep,
or I thought it was Honor Defense.
No, I'm sorry, it's Honor Defense. I believe the model is called Honor Guard, and they are not introducing a recall for that from what I saw.
The owner made a comment, and I had actually just started talking to them about getting one in hand. And the long and short of it is, this is going through the same nonsense as SIG was going through. It's not drop safe. And here's the kicker. Here's the thing that I found really interesting. Apparently, and this is all, kind of one side of the story, apparently, according to Patrick, the firearm blog told him not to publish that, not to say that it's not drop safe.
I don't have any information about any of this.
Yeah, but,
if that's the case, that's unfortunate, because you should, if you're putting out information, it should be accurate information, especially if you know there's a problem.
Yeah. Unreal, man. If that's the truth, I mean, the gun not being drop safe, I mean, how do you feel about that? Does that matter to you?
I try not to drop
my don't guns, drop your guns. I get that, but does that matter to you?
I don't know if it does. I would still buy a SIG P320 if I wanted one. I just don't want one. I never really gave it a lot of thought. It's not something that's come up as far as something I've been concerned about. So I can't tell you honestly if it does or doesn't bother me. I don't know. I don't have an answer.
I think the thing that frustrates a lot of people with this drop safe, not drop safe type thing is not necessarily the fact that it went off. Yes, that sucks, right? We can agree that it went off when it wasn't supposed to go off. It shouldn't go off when it hits the ground. I don't think it should go off. I don't think that's an okay thing. I think what really matters here is the reaction of the company behind it.
Yeah.
The guy behind it said something to the effect of, where was that article? Do you have it up?
I'll pull that back up. That'll be 2 seconds here. He
basically said that it's okay. Like, the gun was mishandled. The person reviewing it, I'll read the exact quote here. The truth of the matter is that all firearms will discharge if handled abusively. That is true for any brand or model.
I can see the Glock fanboys foaming at the mouth now.
I really want to take a Glock and hit it with a hammer and put it in a blender and see if it'll go off. And
blender?
Well, how else it's abusive. I mean, what else are you supposed to do?
I don't even think you'll fit it in the
blender.
Throw
it in a trash compactor, see if it'll go off. He went on to say, and this is from Gary Ramey, who I believe is the owner of the company. We believe that Honor Defense makes the best, he says, single stack 9mm pistols. Have you seen a Shield or a Glock? We have tested internally and submitted the firearms for testing by independent labs. That's great. I'm not saying these Honor Defense guns are bad. I'm just saying, making a statement like you're the best, and then especially to go up against something like this. Like, people are seeing this as a negative, and here you are claiming, no, you're full of crap. Like, no, dude, you got to handle this better.
I think that's a problem we see within the industry as a whole. Nobody wants to say, okay, well, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe
you need to own it.
Not only do you need to own it, and I think a lot of it's in how the company handles it, but rather than just, companies seem to downplay the importance or significance of things like that. So rather than saying, oh, that's something we didn't discover during our testing, we had sent it out to independent testers, but we acknowledge that it may be a problem, so here's what we're going to do to fix it and look into it.
Sure.
They just go out on a train and say, no, it's perfect, but we're going to issue a voluntary upgrade.
Which is exactly what SIG did.
Right, no, I know.
SIG got ahead of it quick. They didn't respond very quickly, but they did respond. The email this was, I believe, sent to Gary and then replied back. The product exceeded all industry abusive handling tests, which I don't know if those exist.
I don't know if there's a standard.
There's a military standard.
I don't think there's a standard either within the industry.
There's a military standard for drop testing, but okay. It does not include a certain angle, which is the same angle it appears.
And the SIG problem, right?
Appears to be the SIG. I haven't had a chance to watch the entire thing, but basically he said these are
more
accurate than other similar sized firearms.
Okay. Cool.
I mean, the reality is that this sucks. I'm genuinely disappointed by it, and to go around and claim that it was abusively handled, well, duh, it was dropped. That's what we're calling. That's what the problem is here. And then you're going to pretend like it's the best. Hold the phone, dude. Do you not care? That's like if you bought a car and said, "Hey, when I wrecked it, it completely folded in half." That's not okay. It was a bad situation that was made potentially worse by a potentially, allegedly not drop safe pistol.
Yeah, I don't know. Own it. Say there's a problem with it. Potential problem with it. Look at the product. And if there is, fix it. That's all we want.
Own it, man. That's something that popped up today that I really thought was going to be interesting to talk about.
And my apologies to Heiser Defense.
Well, they make some really weird stuff too.
Yeah, well, different topic for a different day. They haven't introduced anything new recently that I can recall, but they've been introducing a lot of those Derringer type pistols that rifle caliber ones. 308.
The single shot 308 and 7.62 by 39 pistol. That's the size of a Derringer. Is a whole lot of why, but it's a whole lot of I want to shoot it. Like, let's see if I can handle this thing with absolutely no grip. It is like the worst shape of a handgun ever.
The fire, it burns.
All right, so unfortunately, I think that kind of brings us to the end of this week's show. Adam, is there anything you want to add here before we roll out?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well,
I think we're good for this week. Next week we'll have some more stories. If you guys see a story that you want us to talk about on the show, feel free to submit that to us at theguncollective@gmail.com.
Absolutely.
Can't promise you anything, but we'll certainly consider it.
And send your feedback as well to theguncollective@gmail.com. And also, we want to say a special thank you again to our sponsors, Holosun and Frida Munitions. They've been very generous to us, and we seriously appreciate
it's what allows us to give you a podcast.
Yeah, that's how we get here.
Among other things. So if you are looking for the podcast itself, that's available on iTunes, Stitcher, Firearms Radio Network, Google Podcasts, and maybe it'll end up a couple other places that I just don't know about yet. But it is out there, so for those of you looking for the podcast format, you can check it out there. So
cool.
That's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.